About the thing of adoption was that it was new and weird, and I didn't like it that much until I actually got to know the person then.
I was afraid that I would not get to see my brothers as often because whenever I was in a foster home, whenever I got punished, I wouldn't get to go see my brothers, and that was one of my fears, was not being able to see them and not being able to see my real family.
Of children adopted from the public foster care system, 60% are adopted by their foster families, 20% are adopted by relatives, and 20% are adopted by adults who are not known to the child. So you're really talking about a very small population where we're going out and doing active recruitment. That percentage has got to increase dramatically.
We use a 3-part recruitment process. First, we do, of course, the intensive child-specific recruitment, which is going through those case files, which are 5 and 6 feet high, and looking for any potential placements. Okay, so that's the first step. The second step is to go to currently licensed foster adoptive families. We did a survey in 2002 which proved that 13% of our families did not have placements, and they wanted placements. So we go to that pool of people. It's been incredibly productive. And the third thing that we do is general media recruitment, where we do strength-based interviews on television with the children and do it in a way that their personalities absolutely shine through. So between those 3 mechanisms, the child-specific recruitment, targeted recruitment amongst licensed foster adoptive families, and then the general recruitment, we have found families. They are out there. It's just reaching the families that becomes the challenge.
And what I found was, as I reviewed child welfare records, it was not unusual to look at an entire welfare record at a public agency, or private agency for that fact, and find only evidence of 3 or 4 or 5 family members for that young person. I knew I had hundreds, and I wondered where the rest of them were for them. And I began to look and see if there were other ways to find out about these family members, and it turned out that there was. And the easiest one was simply to call the people who the department knew about and ask them questions different from ones they'd been asked before. Questions like, tell me about the family gatherings you remember growing up. Do you remember family reunions? Did you get together at weddings or funerals or for holidays? And if you did, where did you get together at? Who planned them? And how do I call them now?
Or life circumstances changed. I had a case where there was a young lady who we went back to the family, and although that family member still couldn't, she said, well, when you guys first came 5 years ago, my brother was in the service in Germany, but he's back now and he could take him. So just re-exploring relatives, instead of saying they were ruled out, is one very, very rich source of resources.
The child or the youth themselves as a resource. They had so much to say. When you asked or looked in the record from the caseworkers or whoever was involved with this child, or on any documents, it would report there are no birth family, no resources, no relatives. But when I asked the youth at the service plan review, I know Uncle so-and-so, here's his address, here's his number.
And we have to do 2 things. We have to use the technology that's out there. We have to do the LexisNexis searches. We have to look through the driver's license records. We have to look through whatever it takes electronically. But it's that good old-fashioned shoe leather detective work that it often takes. But it works.
First of all, the technology to locate these people inexpensively and swiftly hasn't existed. Even the current form of the technology we use didn't exist until January this year. We've been using some forms of it for about 5 years, but the most powerful version that we have now is fairly new. And the cost is much less. You know, people would now say to me, well, we really can't afford to go find these relatives. Well, the cost of finding these relatives today is about $25. We can afford that.
For some reason, we think that children are disconnected, that they live in a bubble, but they go to school, they have friends, they have families, they have people they've been in contact with in the past, in other foster homes, in relatives, even in their birth family's neighborhood.
Well, when Shani was in a hospital, she called grandma, and then they started visiting each other, and then that's when our older sister Jessica said that she wanted to adopt us, that she was waiting until she hit 21 so she could adopt us. I was put into a foster home with 2 other kids, and I lived there for about 6 months, and then they considered adopting me, but then their foster license were going to expire too soon, so they couldn't. So then I went to another foster home with 10 other children, and they were going to adopt me, but they just weren't fit for me. And I was with them for about 6 months, and then that's when I met the Deans.
It took a lot of time, you know, to find the right home, but I mean, you just gotta try to be patient. As much as you hate the system and you hate being in group homes or foster care homes, you just hate it. I think you just gotta have time. And the program that I was in was just like perfect for me because they focus you as an individual and not just like a bunch of kids. And they really do try to help find a family for you, and it takes time, and it might not like, they may not find it the first couple of families, but I mean, you'll eventually find one. You shouldn't just be free.
A lot of what we're doing right now is really working hard with the foster parents who have already established a bond with these children, and the kids have felt comfortable and accepted in their home and would like to stay in their home. And we're trying to really focus on what it would take for that family to be able to go ahead and make the commitment to adopt the child that they have in their home. Sometimes it's a financial concern, sometimes it's a concern of the unknown and not having a caseworker involved any longer, and that's a scary thought to them because they've always had supports wrapped around them. Sometimes it's just talking through what the concerns are and trying to get to the bottom of what's holding up their ability to commit to a long-term commitment to these children.
The kids who have lived in residential treatment centers and group homes, which is the modern day orphanages, we just don't call them orphanages, have been neglected for so long that we have a process where I no longer have staff sitting in my office. I outstation staff at these programs. So I think that's a great great model, is to outstation adoption and permanency staff in these places, work with their staffs, and develop permanent homes for them. And we've actually gotten a lot of staff people to adopt kids because we do that.
You know, they have rules about kids who come into foster care, the social workers shouldn't adopt them, for instance. But that's because they're 2, 3, 4, and we should be working diligently and hard to help them return home to their parents, and there the rules make sense. But when you're 15, 16, you've been freed for adoption for a number of years, or somebody changed your goal to independent living, which is saying this kid is going to be discharged to nobody, not even their own families. At that juncture, you have to re-look at what you consider a conflict of interest, because it really isn't if you do it right.
Being a professional in the adoption community, I realized that he really needed permanency, and he needed it pretty quickly because he was 14 and it just hadn't been happening for him. Once I had decided that I was going to adopt, I went and I saw the executive director of my agency, and I said, I need you to know that I've made this decision. It's my decision. I'm doing it. And if that means I need to resign, then I'll resign. But I've made my decision, and it wasn't a conflict for them.
The call came for these children that they needed to come into care right then and there. And I frantically was trying to track down a foster family for them, and there was none. So I got tired of looking, so I took them home myself. I was fingerprinted, and I had all the, the rules and regulations were on my side, and I realized it wasn't going to be for more than the weekend, but I needed to be able to get them to a place where they could have dinner and go to bed. And so I took them home. So I was really the only person that they had known since they were little that had been in touch with them, and that, and finally I just said, oh, I should have done this 10 years ago. So I talked with my husband and basically coerced him into having some more kids. And